Thank you, Glenda. Managing growth. Now, when you hear the term growth in relation to business, what's the first word that comes to mind? Sales. I'm sorry?
Sales.
Sales, revenue, right? And that's fairly typical. And what triggered the idea for this program is something that I saw a long time ago when I was involved with Missouri Venture Forum. And those of you who may not be involved with that organization are familiar with them. Their purpose was to promote early stage growth. And so a lot of companies would present at their meetings in hopes of getting funding for their new ideas. But from time to time, they would also have success stories. And this success story came to mind as I was thinking about it. It was a company, a manufacturing company. They'd come up with a new product, and they ended up being very successful with that product. They raised a lot of capital in order to be able to develop the prototypes and do all the testing and develop the facilities, the equipment, the plant, so on, in order to be able to produce the product effectively. They had a very effective marketing and sales campaign, as demonstrated by the amount of demand that they had. And they'd been in business for 5 years. The demand during that time had grown so much that they were considering adding new capacity. So now I want to ask you, what do you think the owner's focus was at this point in time?
Working capital?
Working capital, exactly. Which I found surprising. As successful as everything up to that point had indicated, their primary focus was raising more capital. Why? They had not been profitable in 5 years. Not been profitable in 5 years. Now imagine trying to raise more money for a company in which you hadn't been profitable for 5 years, but the demand was very high. Very difficult. So your task now, and I want you to work together at your tables on this, is to identify what this owner could have done to prevent this dilemma. And some of the things for you to consider, and you don't have to limit yourself to these by any stretch of the imagination, is what kind of growth monitoring systems could they have had in place to help them assess the growth that they were experiencing and manage it more effectively? What kind of frequency of review should they have had in these systems? Should have been daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, annually, or some combination of those? And possibly, and you don't have to include these, what kinds of key performance indicators might have helped them avoid this dilemma? Yes?
Just to clarify, the dilemma is that they have not been profitable. Is that
not been profitable in 5 years and had a need to go out and find outside financing in order to continue to grow the business. Okay. And you've got 5 minutes to work on this. Again, work on it at your tables. Rick, I would encourage you to join a table. Yeah. Okay, if we can come back together again, please. Come back. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay, now we'd like to hear your ideas that would help a business owner in this situation avoid facing this kind of situation. So, excuse me. Will, let's start with your table in the back. What'd you...
He didn't think it was unreasonable for us to be in this position in their first 5 years, so the expectations might be off in terms of, most companies are not
profitable in their first 5 years. So assuming the model on paper worked and they were following the model, The number one thing he could have done to prevent this was raise more money out of before even starting.
Okay.
And had he done that during those 5 years, he would have been more focused on running the business as opposed to defocused, continuing to raise money.
All right. Other thoughts or? Okay, good. Over here, Bill, your table.
And I want to kind of build on something that Josh said there, and that is that maybe it was reasonable to expect that the company would not be profitable after 5 years, but that's something you could have planned for at the very beginning. In other words, that the first thing we talked about here was a business plan that set out the first 5 years and maybe answered that question at the very beginning. Well, what if we're not profitable after 5 years? Is that okay? Do we expect we'll still be underwater? When do we expect we're going to break even? What's our break-even point? And Andy pointed out, of course, you've got to have good measures, you've got to have good numbers, you've got to have good barometers, you've got to know where you are on either daily or weekly or quarterly basis.
Okay, all right. Mary, your table?
It's kind of part of the business plan or the strategic plan, but what about their pricing model? If their sales are really, really, really good, maybe they're not pricing it high enough. And so it could be that they're just not looking, they're looking at volume instead of quality, and that could be getting them into trouble.
Okay. You might be surprised that I have an affinity for that answer.
I knew you'd like that answer. Raise your prices.
For those of you who are guests here, I wrote a book on pricing, so that's why I made that comment. Les, your table here? Oh. Okay.
We talked a lot about cost control and monitoring that and making sure there wasn't fluff in the manufacturing system, as we called it, or excess expense, and reviewing that maybe weekly, monthly, quarterly, so that you make sure that as you grow, you're still profitable and maintain that profitability.
Okay, very good. Good.
So it's going to sound a little bit like a broken record here, but I think one thing that you can do is when you're talking about breaking down profitability and expenses is to do it by department level so you can really isolate where particular problems are. We just assume that they should be profitable after 5 years, true or not. But looking at both the frequency and the specificity of the KPIs, are you looking at margins, gross margins, net margins, revenue, or excuse me, profit, productivity, and establish some leading and lagging indicators so you're not just waiting till the end to determine whether or not you've hit the mark. And then the other one here is the pricing. We thought of you, Dale. Seriously, it's and also the market positioning. Are we positioning ourselves as a low-cost provider? If we're doing that, we're probably setting ourselves up for failure, or else we're going to have a hell of a lot of volume to make some money.
Yeah.
And then making sure that you're also pursuing the kind of client and customer target that'll make you profitable.
Very good. Very good.
Well, he kind of stole our thunder a little bit, so thanks a lot for that.
Well, great minds think alike.
They do. So, but we did look at kind of looking at KPIs first of all, and looking at net sales and gross margin, and then looking at the gross margin as a KPI, then looking at the expenses after that. But then how does the gross margin and expenses match up with their budget for the year? And then looking at that and building strategic systems that would actually help meet those KPIs.
Okay.
And then looking if we needed more money.
Very good. Dave, your table?
Yeah. Well, the good news about being, or the bad news about being the very last table is you guys got to get all the good ideas. The good news is we've had every single one that you've mentioned.
We want to hear what you
Sorry. Okay. The bad news is of being the last table that you guys got all the good ideas, but the good news is we had every single one of those just before you did.
And over here?
But a couple I'll add is On the projections, it's not unusual for companies to lose money going out, but what's important is to have a projection of how you're going to do that. If you expect to do that, and then have a plan to turn that around, and then manage your operations against the financial reports, against those projections, and see what the differences are.
Okay, very good. Yeah, Lori?
Ours were much the same as everyone else. Three key things were we felt KPIs were extremely important. If you're not measuring the specifics of the production and how things are going throughout the whole business, you have no way of knowing if things are working the way you expected or not. Frequency, we really feel it's important to have a real lifetime reporting, not quarterly, because by the time you report quarterly and then address the issue, research the issue, and take action on the issue, you're a good 6 months behind on making any changes to improve. And then last but certainly not least was the pricing. We, questioned the fact, are they using a cost plus model, or are they really taking into effect all the value that they're providing with this new product, and could they really be pricing a little differently?
Good. Yes, Tom.
So building on what Dave said and projecting for growth and profitability, we've talked a lot about KPIs on the cost side, but some of the KPIs we haven't talked about on the revenue side are things like churn rate, both as customer count and dollar count, and lifetime value of a customer relationship. So if you're at the 5-year point and you're expecting customers to buy more, buy again, keep buying, stick with you if it's a recurring revenue model, and so forth, then being unprofitable at year 5 may not be a problem if you're expecting you're going to add new customers to the funnel, and the existing customers are going to keep adding revenue to the funnel. There will be a point at which you get profitable. So measuring churn and lifetime value of customer relationships, very important.
Very good, thank you. And I'm out of time here, but I'm going to ask Lori, what's your tagline?
My on target for profitable growth.
Okay, one of the things that I'm going to suggest, because I started the program asking you what brought, when I said growth in business, what did that bring to mind? And the answer was revenues, and I think most of us would agree with that. But I'm going to suggest that we change our language. Lori talks about profitable growth. And if we're going to manage our growth, shouldn't profit be a consideration in that aspect? And I don't think that it is as often as it should be. Thank you very much.